Rain pounded the cracked asphalt of the deserted street as Officer Daniels skidded to a stop, his boots splashing in ankle-deep water. The night was cold, relentless and loud, the kind of storm that drowns out everything except sirens and screams. But what stopped him in his tracks wasn't a call on the radio, it wasn't a suspect or a crime scene, it was the soft whimper from the gutter. He almost missed it. Hidden between an overflowing storm drain and a pile of soaked trash bags was a body, small, fragile, unmoving. Daniels dropped to his knees, instantly soaked through, his flashlight trembling in his hand. And then he saw it. A golden retriever, matted fur, heavy with mud and rain, curled into himself like he was trying to disappear. The dog didn't flinch, he didn't lift his head, he just stared, eyes dull, chest rising slow. Daniels reached out slowly. "Hey, buddy!" The golden's body twitched at the sound, barely. His ribs showed through his waterlogged fur like they were trying to break free from inside. His nose bled. One paw was twisted at a wrong angle, and his tail, what was left of it, lay limp in the floodwater. The cop had seen a lot in 10 years on the force. Gunshots, accidents, people at their worst. But this hit different. He looked around, no collar, no leash, no house nearby. Just warehouses and barbed wire, the forgotten edge of town. This dog had been dumped like trash. Daniels pulled off his jacket and wrapped it around the trembling body. It didn't do much, but it was something. He held the dog close, shielding him from the wind as thunder cracked overhead. The golden's breathing was shallow. Every inhale was a struggle, every exhale a whisper. Someone had left him to die. Daniels radioed it in, voice tight with urgency. "Animal down. Critical condition. I need backup and transport now." But no one came. It was a Saturday night in the city, and dispatch was drowning in chaos. The nearest rescue unit was over an hour away. He looked back at the dog, then at his patrol car. He didn't think. He moved. Gently, he lifted the retriever into his arms. Mud and blood soaked through his uniform, but he didn't care. The dog let out a soft, broken whine, not fear, not pain, just a plea. As Daniels placed him in the passenger seat, he saw something that made him freeze. Scars, old ones. Faint but clear. Across the chest. The neck. The paw. Not from an accident. From abuse. Someone hadn't just abandoned this dog. They had broken him. Slowly. Over time. And now he was here, bleeding out in the rain. Daniels's hands clenched the wheel as he drove toward the only emergency vet still open on the outskirts of town. He looked over at the golden retriever slumped in the seat, wrapped in a jacket that was too wet to offer warmth. "Stay with me, buddy," he muttered. "You've come this far, just a little longer." But then, the retriever's head slid down, his body stilled, and for a moment, just a second, Daniels couldn't hear him breathing. His heart dropped. Was he too late? The windshield blurred with rain as he ran a red light, tires screeching through the turn. He didn't care about protocol now, he only cared about keeping that dog alive. And then, as the clinic's neon sign appeared through the storm, Daniels heard it. A gasp, a soft, shallow breath. He was still fighting, just barely. And Daniels knew then this wasn't just a rescue, this was a beginning. The emergency clinic doors burst open as Officer Daniels charged through, the golden retriever limp in his arms. The sterile scent of antiseptic hit him instantly, followed by the piercing brightness of fluorescent lights. A young vet technician behind the counter dropped her clipboard the moment she saw them. "Trauma case!" Daniels shouted, his voice cutting through the silence. "No pulse!" Then he gasped. "He's not gone! He's still here!" A team of 2 techs and 1 vet rushed from the back. Gurney wheels screeched across the tile. Daniels gently laid the dog down, and that's when the staff, Truly saw him. Mud-caked fur, exposed ribs, twisted paw, old scars buried beneath new wounds. His eyes were barely open, his breath so faint it fogged the air in slow, ghost-like pulses. "What's his name?" the vet asked, snapping on gloves. Daniels froze. He didn't know. There was no name tag, no chip, nothing. "I don't know," he said quietly. "I just found him like this. But he's been through hell." The Golden was rushed into the operating area. Daniels wasn't allowed past the swinging doors, but he stayed rooted to the spot, drenched, breath shallow, watching the blur of blue scrubs move around the lifeless dog. The monitor beeped, faint but consistent. Alive, barely. For the next hour, Daniels sat motionless in the waiting room, his soaked jacket clinging to him, rain still dripping from his boots. He couldn't stop thinking about the dog's eyes. They weren't just tired, they were defeated. Hollow. What kind of human did this? What kind of monster looks into a creature's eyes and leaves them to die in the gutter? His radio crackled at his hip, dispatch asking for updates. Daniels didn't answer. He wasn't leaving. Not yet. A soft voice finally pulled him from the spiral. "Officer?" It was the veterinarian. She looked tired, her gloves stained, but her eyes held something he hadn't expected. Hope. "He made it through the worst of it," she said. "He's not out of danger yet, but he's stable for now." Daniels stood up too quickly, dizzy from the adrenaline. "He's going to live?" She hesitated, then nodded slowly. "If he keeps fighting, yes. He's severely dehydrated, malnourished, and that front paw was shattered. He's going to need surgery, time, and someone willing to care for him." "I'll pay for everything," Daniels said without blinking. "Just keep him alive." The vet studied him for a moment, then gave a tired smile. "We already started IV fluids, pain meds, and cleaning his wounds. He's sedated, but you can sit with him." Daniels followed her into the dim recovery room. The dog, now cleaned, lay on a heated blanket, a cone around his neck, and tubes in his legs. He looked even smaller now, vulnerable. Daniels pulled a chair close and sat beside him. "You made it," he whispered. The dog didn't respond, but something shifted, barely. His ear twitched, his breathing steadied. Daniels leaned closer. "You're not trash. You're not forgotten. You're here. And I'm not going anywhere." For the first time in hours, Daniels let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. He had arrived on that street expecting nothing more than a routine patrol. Instead, he had found a soul clinging to life by a thread, a soul that had no name, no one. But that was about to change, because Daniels wasn't just going to be his rescuer, he was going to be his second chance. The early hours of the morning brought a heavy stillness to the clinic, broken only by the soft hum of machines and the distant clinking of medical tools being cleaned. The golden retriever remained curled in his blanket, barely stirring. Though dry now, his fur clung in matted tufts to his fragile body, a living map of suffering. Every rib showed through his coat, his paws twitched now and then, involuntary flickers born from pain or memory, or both. Officer Daniels returned before the sun had risen. He hadn't slept. After leaving the clinic the night before, he had gone straight to the station, where he sat in silence, staring at the rain through his windshield, the weight of helplessness pressing against his chest. He couldn't forget the look in the dog's eyes, that mix of fear and silent pleading that made it impossible to walk away. Now, as he entered the dimly lit recovery room, the Golden's head lifted slightly. It was the first time he had moved on his own. Daniels froze in place. Their eyes locked. It was a quiet, fragile moment, but it was enough to crack something deep inside him. The officer dropped to one knee near the kennel, unsure what to say. The Golden stared back at him, unmoving, but he didn't cower. He didn't retreat.
He simply watched.
"You made it through the night," Daniels murmured, voice barely louder than a whisper. "I wasn't sure you would." He reached into the canvas bag slung over his shoulder and pulled out a fresh fleece blanket, soft, blue, and smelling faintly of laundry detergent. He carefully folded it and slid it into the kennel without touching the dog. The Golden didn't flinch this time. He watched, eyes following every motion, but stayed still. Daniels sat back against the wall and pulled out a thermos of coffee. He sipped in silence, occasionally glancing over. After a while, he began to speak. Not to anyone in particular, just into the quiet of the room. "I've seen a lot of things on patrol," he said. "Things that don't leave you. Fires, wrecks, people at their worst. And sometimes you come home and it's like all that noise just follows you. And you don't really sleep. You just wait until the next day." He looked up at the Golden. "I think you know that feeling." The dog didn't move, but something in his eyes softened. The clinic vet entered, clipboard in hand, pausing when she saw the scene. She said nothing at first, just nodded toward Daniels, a small, surprised smile tugging at her lips. "He lifted his head on his own this morning," she said quietly. "His vitals are stable. It's too early to celebrate, but it's a good sign." Daniels gave a quiet nod. "No updates on his owner?" She shook her head. "Nothing. No microchip, no lost reports. No one looking for him."
Daniels stared at the Golden, jaw tightening. Then maybe he was never really owned.
He stood and opened the kennel door slowly. The dog tensed, legs shaking as he tried to stand. Daniels didn't reach for him. He simply knelt inside the doorway, hand resting on his knee. "You don't have to be afraid anymore," he said. "I won't hurt you." The Golden lowered his head, and after a moment he inched forward. One paw, then another, trembling beneath him. He didn't make it far, only a few inches before collapsing again, too weak to hold himself up. But he had tried. Daniels swallowed hard and gently slid the blanket underneath him, adjusting it so the dog was supported. The Golden didn't resist. His breathing was slow, steady. And then, as Daniels rested his hand just beside the dog's paw, something incredible happened. A soft nudge. The Golden pressed his nose against Daniels' fingers. Daniels didn't move. He didn't want to spook him, but he felt the wet warmth of the dog's breath, the slightest pressure of trust forming between them. And then a single lick, tentative, shaky, but real. It was the first physical gesture of connection the dog had given since being rescued. Daniels blinked away the sting in his eyes. "You're not just surviving anymore," he whispered. "You're coming back."
The vet returned minutes later and froze at the sight.
"He licked your hand?" she asked, astonished. Daniels nodded slowly. "Yeah, he did." The vet exhaled, her shoulders relaxing. "I've seen a lot of broken dogs come through here, but when they choose to reach out like that, that's when you know there's something still burning inside them." Daniels looked down at the Golden. The dog was now resting his head on the blanket, eyes half closed, breathing slowly, calmly. He looked exhausted, but at peace. "He just needed someone," Daniels murmured. "That's all." The Golden Retriever didn't need words. His response was simple. He shifted his body, weakly, just enough to touch Daniels's knee with his paw. A silent thank you, an unspoken promise. From that moment on, Daniels knew this wasn't just another dog left behind. This was the beginning of something neither of them had ever expected to find again, a reason to fight for life. The next week brought subtle miracles, the kind that most people would miss, but Officer Daniels saw every single one. The Golden Retriever, still unnamed, had begun to rise to his feet with help. He no longer flinched when someone walked into the room. The tremors that once shook his body had lessened. And though his appetite was small, he was eating actual food, no longer just sips of water or the occasional spoon-fed meal. Daniels visited every day. He started bringing worn t-shirts that smelled like him, placing them inside the kennel so the dog would feel his presence even when he wasn't there. The Golden would curl around the fabric as if it were a lifeline. Each time Daniels entered, the dog would lift his head. That small motion became their daily ritual, silent recognition between two beings who had found solace in one another's quiet company. "You've got fight in you," Daniels would whisper, crouching beside him. "More than most people I know." It was on the 8th day that the Golden took his first independent steps. The vet had just finished her morning exam and stepped out to update the chart. Daniels sat nearby, scrolling through his phone, reading articles on rescue adoption and how to gain a traumatized dog's trust. He glanced up and froze. The Golden was standing, wobbly, legs shaking slightly, but standing. He took one step toward the edge of the kennel mat, then another, then a third. His eyes found Daniels, and even though his tail didn't wag, something in his face had changed. Less guarded, more curious. Daniels stood and crouched again, this time opening his arms ever so slightly. "Hey, easy now, I'm right here." The Golden hesitated, then limped forward. When his head reached Daniels's chest, he stopped and leaned in. Not a dramatic leap, just a slow, deliberate press of his face against the officer's chest. Daniels felt his throat tighten. He let his hand slide gently over the Golden's back, feeling the faint tremble of ribs that still jutted out too far but were slowly being covered by strength. It was the moment he knew he wasn't going to let this dog go. By the end of the second week, Daniels began the adoption process. The clinic staff were surprised, not because they doubted his dedication, but because officers rarely took animals home. Their lives were unpredictable, demanding, but Daniels never wavered. "I don't just want him," he told the vet. "He needs me. And I think I need him too." The day the papers were signed, the clinic hosted a small farewell gathering. The staff gathered near the exit, watching as Daniels approached the reception desk with the Golden, now named Chance, walking beside him, leash loose, step steady. Chance had been through hell, but his posture was different now. Head slightly higher, gaze alert. He still bore the marks of what he'd survived, scarred paws, missing patches of fur, but his spirit was no longer caged. The moment they stepped outside, Chance paused and looked back at the clinic doors. For a second he didn't move. Then slowly he turned his head toward Daniels, and a soft puff of air escaped his nose. A final goodbye to the pain that had once defined him. Daniels opened the passenger door of his cruiser, placing a thick blanket across the seat. "Ready?" he asked softly. Chance jumped up, not smoothly, not quickly, but willingly. That was all that mattered. That night, at home, Daniels lit a small lamp in the living room and dropped onto the couch. Chance, still nervous about the unfamiliar space, paced for a moment. Then he spotted the same blue fleece blanket from the clinic, now draped over the edge of the couch. He walked toward it, sniffed once, and gently laid down, half on the blanket, half against Daniels's boot. Daniels didn't move. He simply reached down and placed a hand on Chance's head. "No more cold nights, no more rain. You're home now." And just like that, a broken golden retriever who once lay dying in the mud was now resting in the warmth of a home beside the man who had pulled him back from the edge. They didn't need words, because for the first time in both their lives, they weren't alone anymore. At first, there were small steps. Daniels would open the back door, and instead of hiding under the table, Chance would take a cautious step outside. He still flinched at loud noises, especially thunder, but no longer bolted. Instead, he'd look to Daniels, and slowly something began to build between them. Trust. Real, earned, unshakable trust. Daniels began bringing Chance along for short rides in his patrol car. Nothing official at first, just a trip to the park, to the quiet part of town where geese waddled across the road and the breeze carried the scent of fresh-cut grass. Chance would sit in the passenger seat, head low but eyes wide, watching the world through a new lens, safe, steady, and beside the man who had pulled him from the edge of death. One particular morning, Daniels brought Chance to the police department. The annual community open house was underway, and while Daniels wasn't the kind to show off, something told him this story was worth sharing. He opened the passenger door. "Come on, boy," he said gently. Chance stepped down, confident, upright. And as they entered the building together, it felt symbolic. He wasn't the broken dog from that alley anymore. He was walking tall, shoulders back, tail lifted just slightly. The transformation was undeniable. Inside, chatter faded into soft gasps. "Is that the one from the rain?" Daniels gave a small nod. "Yeah, this is Chance." A wave of warmth filled the room. Officers, families, even a few kids gathered. Some reached out tentatively, unsure if he was friendly. Chance responded the only way he knew how. He pressed his head into their palms, his soft eyes closing as if saying, "Thank you. I'm okay now." Someone asked Daniels what it had been like, finding him in that condition. He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "I think we saved each other," he said quietly. He was broken, but so was I. A hush settled in the room. From that moment on, Chance wasn't just a dog. He became a symbol in their department, not of weakness, but of resilience. Later that evening, after the event, Daniels and Chance returned home. The rain had begun to fall again, not a storm, just a soft drizzle, like the sky whispering old memories. Daniels sat on the porch, coffee in hand, watching the droplets gather on the railings. Chance lay at his feet, head resting gently on his paws. "You're not afraid of it anymore, huh?" Daniels said, glancing down. Chance looked up, his eyes catching the light just right, and nudged Daniels' boot with his nose. They stayed like that for a while, just the two of them, wrapped in the quiet hum of rain and healing. Later that night, as Daniels was brushing his teeth, he caught a glimpse of something in the hallway mirror. Chance, lying at the foot of the bed, sleeping peacefully. There was no twitching, no whimpering. Just a calm rise and fall of his chest. He had found his place, his home. And Daniels had found something too, something he hadn't even realized he was missing. A purpose, a reason to breathe a little deeper, to hope again. The next morning, Daniels clipped on Chance's new ID tag, shiny, clean, engraved with a single line,
"Found in the rain, stayed for life."
Because that's exactly what Chance had done. If you believe in second chances, in quiet heroes, and in the bond between man and dog, like, comment, and share this story.
You never know who might be waiting for their own chance.